Ahoy hoy, I'm Planarwalk, and just over a week ago I had a debate with Rightthehand. Yes, the same Rightthehand that destroyed his own argument. Now for those of you who don't want to watch the debate, I'm going to summarize it. Can you please answer this question? Sure, here's a perfectly reasonable answer for you, take it. That doesn't prove anything, you're wrong, I did an experiment, you haven't done any experiments. I just saved you 3 hours of your time. Now one of the arguments that he used is that you need to have a container to have gas pressure. This seems to be a very common argument that flat earthers use, but flat earthers, here's a little bit of a hint. You don't need to make an argument to go la 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 la, not listening. In fact, it would be a lot better for everyone if you just did that in a padded room. Now there are a few things flawed about this argument, but Rightthehand has a very, very special, and indeed it is special, variation on this argument. So in Rightthehand's variation of this argument, there only needs to be a container around where there is gas pressure. It doesn't matter if it's a variation in gas pressure, there just needs to be a container around where there is gas pressure. So, you know, the universe could have a container around it and would be fine. Now, of course, Rightthehand takes this to mean that there's a dome over the Earth, even though there is zero evidence for his statement. And I didn't really think about this during the debate, but if there were any gas pressure outside of that dome, then that would also need a container. Let's just hope that no one's trying to drill through the dome or anything, because if they manage to get through, Rightthehand has shown that would be fucked. Pressure would just cease to exist the instant that happened. Or it could mean that Rightthehand's argument is completely flawed, because his argument is simply if you have gas pressure, then you need to have a solid container. Now if you Google the pressure of interplanetary space, the pressure there is 1 × 10⁻⁴ pascals. And by Rightthehand's own admission, that is still pressure. So Rightthehand could be right about gas pressure always needing a container. But for Rightthehand to be right, there would need to be a container around the entire universe. And if you can prove that there's a solid container around the universe, I will fry my left testicle. I just gotta hope that the expansion of the universe just doesn't suddenly stop. But that's not the whole reason why his argument is flawed. Let me explain. He has supposedly done experiments to show that gas pressure needs a solid container. And in these experiments, he shows that in the container, you can have a higher or lower gas pressure. Now I proposed an experiment which would show that you could have gas pressure next to a vacuum. But he said because it would take place inside a vacuum chamber, that it still needs a container. And yes, I suppose I do need a container, but I could do the exact same thing without a container, except there would be no vacuum, but you wouldn't accept that because you'd say that the atmosphere around us is within a container. But with that in mind, let's analyze his experiment. So gas within a container proves that all gas pressure needs a container, according to him. Well, what if we take the container away? Would there still be gas pressure in the place where that container was? Now, if you're a flat earther, you probably need a bit more time, so just rewind it and keep on rewinding it until you've got the answer. If even one flat earther's watching, I'm gonna have a lot of watch time on this video. But the answer is yes. Unless you had a place where there was absolutely no gas pressure, then if you take away that container, there would be gas pressure there. And as far as I know, there's always pressure somewhere in the universe. Now I know what some people are thinking. If there's always gas pressure anywhere you go in the universe, then it would be literally impossible for him to make an experiment up to my standards. Much like it's impossible for me to make an experiment up to his standard to show that water can stick to a ball due to gravity. But here's the important thing. It doesn't have to be in the way that he's going about it. When people give evidence for gravity, are they showing water sticking to a small ball? Or are they doing something completely different? You see, if you have gas pressure inside a container that has a different pressure to the gas pressure outside of the container, you are not showing that there needs to be a bigger container. But you can give evidence for a bigger container, just in a different way. Like, I don't know, shoot a rocket up and watch it explode on the dome or something. That would by far be way better evidence than saying, oh, there's gas pressure in this container that I made. Now I get what some flat earthers might be saying. You might be saying something like, oh, I don't have the money to build a rocket, or I don't know how to build a rocket. And I mean, sure, flat earthers may not have the money or know-how individually, But I'm sure if you all put your money together and put your collective knowledge together, you might be able to figure something out. I mean, you've got Mad Mike. Oh, but Mad Mike is a paid shill, apparently, because anyone that actually tries to prove your shit is a paid shill? But hey, what do I know? Apparently I'm a paid shill too. I mean, I did get $200 from Google. But here's my advice to Rightthehand, because your arguments are very poorly formed. Because your arguments seem to be, this is what I have observed happening, so therefore it should happen in this way that I expect things to happen. But you haven't given any reason as to why. And the problem is, if you do give any reason as to why, then you have a whole lot of other problems that you have to deal with. Like, I don't know, maybe that thing called the pressure gradient? Because the answer that people slightly more intelligent than Rightthehand would give is that places of high pressure should always flow to places of low pressure. So therefore, the high pressure atmosphere of Earth should flow into the low pressure vacuum of space. And despite it being wrong, that is a far better argument than the ones that you've been presenting, because it actually gives an explanation as to why you expect things to be the way that you expect them to be. Because if you don't give a reason, then there's no way to work out what would happen if things aren't the way that you think they are. And that's especially important if we want to falsify your nonsense. And if your nonsense is unfalsifiable, then we shouldn't accept it in the first place. Now this video isn't over yet, because there's still a bit of a hole that I need to tie up, and that hole is, how would a pressure gradient be bad news for Rightthehand at all? Now first off, I'm going to have to assume why he thinks we need to have a container, and that is that high pressure will always flow towards low pressure. Because I really don't think that there would be any other case. What, would the atmosphere just suddenly vanish if the container disappeared? No, I don't think that's the case. I think what Rightthehand is expecting is for a huge suck. So if high gas pressure always flows to low gas pressure, why doesn't it? You see, the reason I give is gravity. And there is evidence for gravity. For example, Cavendish. So because gravity acts as a constant force that is always being applied, there is a pressure gradient. What was the flat earth explanation for it again? And gravity also negates the need for a container because gravity acts as the container. The reason for this is because the container can be seen as an opposing force, same as gravity. There are a few differences, however, because a molecule bouncing off a container wall will act differently to a molecule affected by gravity. But the problem with getting into that discussion with Rightthehand is that he probably doesn't believe in molecules. I know for a fact that he doesn't believe in atoms, so molecules probably aren't too far off. So because gravity affects molecules differently to how a solid container would affect molecules, that allows us to have a pressure gradient. Now Rightthehand did try to explain this with weight, but the problem with that is that it just holds no weight. The problem there is that weight is a result of a force acting upon mass. Now weight itself isn't the force, it's just the result of force. Just like the warmth of a house isn't insulation, it would be a result of insulation. And of course you can measure how much insulation a house has by how warm it is. I wonder if that analogy was caused by the fact that I'm fucking freezing right now. One thing that might be fun to do would be to calibrate some scales so that they're on their sides, and then have a magnet that's attracted to something on the other side of the scales and measure the weight of that magnet. Or if that's too complicated for flat earthers, just measure the weight of something at the North Pole and then measure the weight of it at the equator. Wait, I'm sorry, that might still be a bit too complicated for flat earthers. So what flat earthers need to do is they need to come up with a force that is constantly acting on things that pulls them downwards. You know, kind of like Droppity, but actually able to make predictions. And it also needs to be falsifiable, kind of like how magnetic gravity was falsified over and over and over again. You've had, what, 4 years maybe to figure this shit out? You still can't work it out. And yes, I suppose you could say, oh, we've had only 4 years, you've had hundreds of years, 400 years to work this stuff out. But you've also got a whole lot of technology at your disposal now, which you are attributing to the rise of flat earthers, so why don't you put the technology to good use and actually figure flat earth stuff out? Or is flat earth bullshit and that's why you can't do that? I think we know the answer to that, so leave a like and subscribe if you like this video. Leave a comment letting me know what you'd like me to make a video on in the future. As always, a big shout out to my $20 or more patrons. Agnostic, Aussie, and What Jesus. If you want to support me, you can do so on Patreon. Link will be in the description. But anyway, I will see you in the next video. Between you and me, thank you for watching. Whoa, one take! And by one take, I mean that end part. I think I took over 50 takes for this whole video.